All right. So here we go. We're recording. Bryan here with us. So Bryan, from what I understand, almost 20 years. I think you were the third farmer in the ALUS program, and for almost 20 years you ran it as CEO. You recently have moved to Chief of Strategy. You also have your own farm in, where is it, Norfolk, Ontario,
Norfolk County. Yeah.
called Why You. Help me here for a second. YU Ranch,
Why you?
grass-fed beef. So I am so excited to hear a little bit more from you about the local food system, hear about this organization. It sounds like it's doing incredible work. So if you want to share a little bit about your background, and then let's dive in with let's dive in.
Sure. So the short story is this: we're given the opportunity to reinvent ourselves on our farm. I've been here for 46 years, but like everybody in this area, we grew tobacco, and that came to an end. And so, of the up to 3,000 farmers that grew tobacco in this region, everybody had the chance to sort of reinvent themselves, and it occurred in different sort of ways. We Our objective was to claim back our independence by doing something that was unique, tailored to a specific marketplace, not definitely not a commodity. And so we based our new enterprise on something that didn't exist at the time, was grass-fed beef. At the time, beef was beef, as you might recall. And so we headed off down that path. We really wanted to root what we did in our stewardship ethic. So basically, we looked at our farm, which is an important, integral part of Carolinian Canada, so very biodiverse here, and asked the cattle to fit inside that envelope. And we didn't want to do anything other than grow grass. So really, our farm operation, we don't really grow grass. We don't really grow beef. We harvest the energy of the sun, carbon from the atmosphere, and our grasses. And the cattle are the harvesting machines that happen to be self-propelled and automated and duplicate themselves every year. It made a lot of sense to me to carve out a niche inside a marketplace that was just commodified at the time. So that allowed us to declare our own independence, make our own brand, and speak to consumers directly. Along the way, a really important thing happened to me. As I was approached through a Christmas dinner, actually, to think about the ALUS program, which at the time was just a conceptual thing. And I joined as a third participant farmer, and as you have illuminated, I went on to play a significant role in the growth and development of ALUS. ALUS is more, it's a principle-based, not-for-profit organization that's delivered through communities across Canada. But what you need to understand about ALUS is the frame that we're painting for farmers, and that is that the farm can be productive of food, fiber, energy, and ecosystem services that support human life on the planet. Now, you can think about simple things like water filtration, where a farmer can filter water upstream instead of filtering it downstream using an industrial water filtration plant. You can think about sequestering carbon, if that interests you. You can also think about another ecosystem service would be creating more biodiversity. Biodiversity is closely linked to, in some people's minds, to human wellness and health. So that fit our eye really, really well, that we were productive of these things. We weren't the people that were protecting nature. We are the ones that were making more. Now, that in itself illuminates a little bit of thinking around ALUS, which was it was a market-based idea. And that is that ecosystem services have value. I mean, we pay water filtration plant people and concrete and plants to filter water. The analog is we can do that on the farm using our plants, right? The plants that we grow. So that's a really good analog to get you into the space that ecosystem services have an emerging, or had an emerging market space in front of it. There's a lot of theory and talk about it at the time. I think we at ALUS created an organization that not only engaged farmers to produce more nature on their lands and hence the ecosystem services, But we created a marketing platform that placed those ecosystem services into an emerging marketplace that is really coming to fruition now in the growth of ALUS. So that's sort of the short course: valuing nature, valuing humans that can produce more nature, getting more out of farms, understanding that farms are much more complex than a simple commodity place, and that farmers are more sophisticated and able to do more for society than they currently are asked to do or viable to do. So to me, it's farmers standing up on their hind legs and saying, there's a role for us to play that's greater than the role you used to think we played.
No, I don't. I'm relatively new. I think 2016 was when my wife Sarah and I and our company started helping some local farmers. And really that was, I look back and I realized there was so much that I was ignorant to with the local food system, and I don't mean that in like a weird or rude kind of way. I had no idea. And had never really thoughtfully considered different aspects of it. And it was when it was presented, it was like, once you see some of these things or hear some of these things, you can't unsee them or hear them. And so this, even for example, the idea when cash crop farming was explained to me, I'd never thought of it. We're surrounded by tons of, farms in our area. And when it was explained to me, I immediately saw similarities in our field. So, with our company doing marketing work, you could see in the business space, there's this idea of niching down, right? So quite often they strip away, experts will suggest you strip everything away except for this one thing that you do. And you optimize for it for your KPIs, your key performance indicators, for financial return, right, is one of the major ones. So yield overall, like what is your, the amount of customers you serve a product or whatever, and your return on, what is your return, your profit, et cetera. And I'm looking at these fields and I'm like, wow, they've optimized with monocultures, they've optimized the land to a point where, like, down to the seed, genetically, down to, with machinery, to a point where you have these massive, sophisticated machines that are just really brilliant the way they're built. And then quite often they're serving one primary purpose. The land is prepared for one purpose. And then when you look at the KPIs, the amount of yield is astronomical. The amount of profit is astronomical. And then I would start to hear, well, there's these voices saying, hey, actually, when you optimize for a monoculture, there are other indicators. Not the only KPIs aren't just money and yield. What about health? What about soil? What about the ecosystem? What is now no longer, happening, or what is now happening? So you have all these other aspects. And I realized that the microbial complexity all the way up to the complexity of an ecosystem factors far more into the equation than most people realize. And I don't even understand regenerative agriculture like people in the industry do. But I looked at it from a business standpoint. I'm like, man, sometimes you see in business, entrepreneurs, founders, others that are so optimized for their key outputs that all of these other indicators of the complexity in their life suffers. Their health suffers, their marriage may suffer, their time with their kids or absence thereof. Quite often addictive behaviors then, come into the picture to be able to, you have all these second and third order consequences that have come out of people optimizing for one or two outputs. And so I'm looking and I feel like almost the agricultural lens of things is a mirror of sort of what's happening philosophically, in some of the way, just the philosophy of doing business in some respect. So the idea of actually seeing more of the complexity returning to the equation, like you said, with farmers looking, hey, actually farmers can stand up more and realize there's a lot more of the picture that farmers can be contributing to this than they realize, I think is really fascinating.
You make a good point, but I'm going to point at a moment in time, and that is, I've been around agriculture long enough to know that agriculture used to revolve around the government extension office. There was a government employee that was, highly knowledgeable about things at the center of our community, in every community. And there was also a mirror image, a stewardship coordinator in our communities as well. So the two things, we had a government paid employee in our communities for either the stewardship aspect of farming or the agronomic aspects or the business aspects. Both those things have been removed from our lives. And I remember still that when I had a problem with a root in a plant in my field, I identified something, and I would go to our extension officer, was named Norm Shadow. He was so part of our community. He got invited to everybody's wedding, But you'd go to Norm's office to say, I've got this root problem, and you'd see 15 other farmers in the parking lot with the same thing in their hand. But we shared community around that, and we shared stories, and we told tales, and together with his expertise, and we sort of resolved our own problems. There's some expertise at community level that was harnessed through that. When those things were removed, when those extension offices were removed, the default actor providing extension was the salespeople from the fertilizer and chemical companies. And they have a job to do, and as you say, to optimize things. And not to say that that's incorrect, that's the way it went. But for me, what it left wanting is value. I think as a community, we're leaving value on the table. And through ALUS and through our work through local food and through YU Ranch, we believe that harnessing that value for rural Canada is a really important thing of what we're doing. And like I said, declaring that we have a greater role to play and a greater relevance to society. And that lets us step outside the sort of commodification scheme and create more relevance and more humanness and more community, more economic activity, quite frankly. Value comes with more dollars, right? So that's sort of how I see the big picture. But there was a moment in time, I still feel like it was a mistake to remove government extension across North America. I hear the same story from our American friends.
I have this, another picture that comes to mind is, seeing some people that have done natural swimming pools where they dig them out and then I've never built one, but you kind of line it and you prepare it and you plant certain plants and you cycle the water in a certain way. And, you're able to have this ecosystem and keep the balance in a way where you could swim in it and, not have it overrun with, anything. And I'm looking at that and I see this almost like an oscillating wave in trends that happen. You see it everywhere, but you see it oscillate so far to a point of just chlorinated pools are the best, concrete, just, like this at some point in society, to a point where now you see people going I'm not sure I really want to get into a chlorinated pool. And you see them instead looking, saying, well, I have this desire, in the sunshine to get into some water. What is the more natural version of this? And it's made me wonder what the pictures will be or could be of more of a commonplace ecosystem that we would see, like you're talking about farmers restoring, with ALUS restoring wetlands or native grasslands and whatnot. It's made me wonder, is there maybe a step down almost of some of that might be seeing a reinvention, reimagination of what backyards might be like, or community sort of, ecosystems might be, where you see more of an integration of either permaculture or, food being grown in a decentralized way, where you see more of a natural ecosystem that is more commonplace than at some kind of sanctuary.
Yeah, and I think, I've never been fond of the regenerative word because it sort of assumes that we've been degenerative, and I don't think any farmer intentionally sets out to be that, nor a backyard person at all. I think a better word might be maybe re-entry, reconnection with where we came from. Stewardship was a big, big part of what we did as farmers, and that sort of has drifted away a little bit, partly because we feel like we're getting our fingers pointed at us from environmental folks, but by reclaiming this space and saying that we have an important role to play, it opens up another avenue, and that is another avenue for knowledge that can flow to farmers. Now, ALUS is delivered at community level, so the advice or knowledge you get transferred to you by working with nature is from your peers and from some experts within your community, and you get to do something that's right for your community first. But what it does is it opens a portal, the same way it opened a portal in my mind, to understanding some of these other natural cycles that we have sort of not been talking about as much as we have now. The conversation is ramping up, but a really great example is on our tallgrass prairie restoration sites here on our place, the microfungi populations are restored. They're off the charts now. Now, microfungi, broadly speaking, are almost eradicated from our agricultural landscapes, but they're an important precursor for how soils work, and in particular, a key element for taking carbon from the atmosphere and storing it in the soil. So down to that level of microfungi that are beneficial to us in agriculture, I don't gain that knowledge without having some exposure back to nature and ALUS, and even understanding the microbiology that exists within our soil and the ability of our plants to capture nutrient. All gives us tools to allow us our creative juices to flow a little bit. But it's important that we understand these cycles and these systems a little bit more, and bringing that knowledge back in an accessible community basis, where we like to think that you can look after your own community first, your own backyard first. Don't worry about global problems. We'll worry about that. Is a really cool way to get people re-engaged and reconnected with the nature that we farm within, right? So this is not to knock down any of the modern agriculture or technology. What it is to say is we need all the tools in the toolbox. And there's a couple tools that maybe we've left laying by the side of the road 20 or 30 years ago that we can pick up again.
Is there maybe this is an oversimplification, but if it was like a pie chart, is there a percentage that you would look at and say, hey, like 20% of the pie overall really should be, at the, I don't know what the term would be, the residential level, like the common people should be, I don't know, doing a little bit more in their backyard, their half acre, their 5 acres, 20% of the equation maybe should be, or maybe this is what ALUS is doing, is part of its materials or content or message is trying to send signal out to say, hey, if we can decentralize more of the response there, but 80% is what we're really trying to send signals to farmers to say, hey, if each of you could be, rewilding or whatever the term would be, 5 acres of your property every couple of years or whatever, is there some sort of picture that you sort of see as, the right foot forward or right steps in the right direction?
Well, for us, it's always been around a simple thing. We allow farmers to identify pieces of land that are marginal or uneconomic to them. And those are pieces of land that they're not getting good yield on for whatever reason. Maybe it's high and dry, maybe it's low and wet, but there's nutrient and chemical and pesticides and diesel fuel being spent on those sites. And that's the opportunity for us to say, listen, grow another type of crop, grow nature, and we'll help you market that crop into the world. I think what's cool about that, as far as your marketing mind, I want you to think about this. When we work with nature's farmers, we're able to communicate it. I mean, not every farmer should do an ALUS project because they've got fence row to fence row, perfect land. Right? There's not an opportunity there. That land should be for growing food. But where there is opportunity, it builds a level of trust inside agriculture that emanates out into our urban communities. And then don't get me started on lawn grass, which is perhaps the turning our attention to what goes on in urban centers. I read somewhere, I don't know what the correct language was, somewhere once a presentation or somebody said that it's the greatest unregulated space for fertilizers and pesticide is lawn grass across North America, right? And there's a lot of product going on lawns that's unregulated. It's not well managed. It's not. It's really not anything. It's just being done, and that's something that if we're concerned about nutrient in our waterways and things like that, maybe we should be, concerned about that a little bit too. Right? And bringing some education to bear there.
I don't know if this would work or not. I have this picture. We've done a fair amount in our backyard. I'm in a bunkie in the backyard right now. We're on slightly under an acre. We've built up a number of beds. We've got irrigation set up on a timer, some greenhouse cover for different parts of it and some raised beds and, flagstone around, fire pit. Like, it's really neat, but I want to add an outdoor sauna. And I've been thinking about, I have this picture in my mind, and probably a cold plunge or pipe out some way to get cold and rinse off after. But I have this picture in my mind of coming out of it and standing on clover, lush green grass that's clover. And it made me wonder, I know there's different kinds of clover from the bit of research I did, but it made me wonder if, like, what transitioning a lawn to clover would be like. And if it would be, do you have to pull it all up, and do you have to kind of, is there a way to kind of, I don't know, but that's one of the pictures I've had because I see the bees, different times seem to be interested in it. It feels great to walk on, and it seems, depending on the kind that you get, if it's low to the ground, really from a lawn care standpoint, it seems like it'd be more self-managing than every week or two running the lawnmower.
Yeah, it's a great idea, and I know exactly the type of clover. However, again, back to the typical urban landscape, that landowner or that person in their backyard might see clover as the enemy rather than their friend, because the clover, of course, would put nitrogen fertilizer that would support the greenness of the grass and create habitat for a little bit of habitat for pollinators and others, because it's a little bit more diverse. So that'd be a nice educational piece right there, is to make people understand that clover is not your enemy, it's your friend in that lawn. It helps keep it green, and helps some of the beneficial insects that live there. But that's sort of a basic first step, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wondered, I think it was Italy, somewhere in Europe, where they had, I don't know if it was a township or area, but they had mandated, I think, that a certain number of houses needed to have this one kind of like brick in it that is made for like a swallow. So it's like built into these houses are these homes built right into it that actually are nested into it. So nesting, of course, around here we see the osprey, platforms that are put up there. And it's interesting when you see these insights where someone might look and say, hey, actually, this population is in need of this kind of habitat. If we were to do this, which, seems very doable. But I've wondered if there could be a version of that for bees, for honey, if there's at the back of properties, or if there's something simple that could, help with that. Simple ways that you could kind of make it easier for people to say, who probably are interested, but really have little bandwidth, in their busy life to beyond, saying yes to something and being able to set it up and have it almost like look after itself.
Well, we've one of the things that's really helped turn people on to the work that we do is we create pollinator habitats. Most times we use floral resources in our plantings across Canada. But we're not concerned about honeybees necessarily. Honeybees are commercial animals. We're concerned about the roughly 850 species of native bees that exist in Canada. And those bees serve nature well. There's often the bee coexists with a particular plant or a suite of plants. So if you lose the bee, you lose the plant. So having habitat for native pollinators, right, is really an easy thing to do in your backyard, but you have to educate people to enjoy the fact that there are a whole suite of bees coming to your yard to forage, and maybe to live in the undisturbed earth there, and that they're beneficial to all of us. But we just got to broaden the mind around honeybees, right? We all think honeybees are wonderful, but when the settlers first came to North America, there were no honeybees here. There was 850 species of bees. And that's the way the world worked. We didn't need honeybees to farm back then, right? Because there was enough native bees around to pollinate your crops. At ALUS, we've got some interesting feedback from some farmers that have done significant pollinator habitats on their lands and stopped renting honeybees and getting wonderful pollination services on their field crops, which is on pollination-dependent crops, which is really kind of a mind-blowing thing. We think we have to rent honeybees or pollination services when it exists in nature if we foster it. Same story can be told for backyard people. They can get a tremendous reward from being the ones that can talk fluently about how important these species are to us.
So I'm curious with ALUS, and from what I understand, with an aging demographic of farmers, and I feel like, let's say that there are younger, interested farmers that are wanting to potentially get into it, but there's the capital deterrent of being able to purchase land or property to get into it. It feels like the step one on the staircase is 5 steps high. Is there any aspect of either ALUS's program or adjacent efforts that are maybe somehow looking to help address that?
Farm succession is a huge problem in Canada, mostly because the capital required to take over a farm, it's almost to the point that if your father's not a farmer, you'll never farm. I remember going to some classes, some agroecological classes at Fleming College in Lindsay near you, and seeing some kids that came from non-farms but were interested in farming. And I sort of thought that was, they're sort of like maybe identifying the Wayne Gretzky's of farming to some extent. These kids had such a innate feel for it, but they had no vehicle. They had no opportunity to buy land because land is so expensive. I think there's opportunity to discuss some different sort of startup models for farms. We've talked to different folks about condoing sort of farms where you could buy, participate in a condoization of a farm where you could have 5 acres as a way to get your startup going, things like that. But we're a long way from having any success on breaking into the mold. And now these days, capital for a farmer to retire is even easier to access because there's a lot of money coming into farming from the investment side. There are large companies and big pension funds that are buying up agricultural land as an investment. So it's pretty turnkey if you want to retire to flip that switch and get your check. So it's but no, at ALUS we don't do a lot about that. It's too big a question, and our mandate is more around restoring nature on the landscape.
Mm-hmm. And then what would be the concise message to a farmer who has land that's maybe, if they haven't heard about, the program, or maybe they have, but they're curious, what would be the simple kind of value proposition to them? It's exactly what you had said earlier, which is, hey, if you have an under monetized, problematic, too high, too dry, or too wet, too dry part of the property, we can help you restore that. You did say to monetize it, and I'm curious to know, is that monetized by carbon offsets, like carbon, some program that has some recurring revenue connected to that?
Yeah, so what ALUS promises is that the farmer will receive a check annually as long as that project's in the ground. That puts a big burden on our organization to find marketplace revenues to support those projects over time. But that's coming. We just inked a deal about in the last month with a company that's representative of the big data center companies, and what they're bringing money to our door is the flow through to farmers to create water filtration and water replenishment. Those big companies, those big data centers are trying to address the issues that the impacts are having on water, and doing work to make sure the farmers then, in our circumstance, are providing the replenishment and the filtration of water to offset their work. Now, a lot of people don't like the term offsetting, but this is the way the world works now, and that there is revenue for that, and we flow that through to farmers. We create the conditions, but there's no single metric. We simply call it a new acre. That's the transactional piece. It's new, it's additional, it's nature, right? And it's managed and maintained by farmers. So for farmers, the message is kind of simple. If you've got hard to farm corners or highly erodible pieces or something that's marginal, uneconomic to you, scratch your stewardship itch and tap into a new marketplace for an emerging marketplace to support your work. That you probably, one of the reasons you probably started farming in the first place was to do stuff like this, to be a steward. So it's not a hard sell, believe me.
And is there some kind of, like I'm thinking B certified, is there some verification or third-party authentication for like these data centers or others that they would receive for a certain amount of like offsetting or whatnot through ALUS, or is it?
We have our own internal system, which is modeled off sort of the highest level carbon trading systems in the world that provide third-party verification and reliable results, great database backing, and great metrics to support it. So that's something we've done in the background here. In other words, to help the farmer monetize that work, we've done a lot of work on quantifying it, on proving our work, and then verifying it. Now, the trick in that is we've done it in a way that protects the landowner's privacy, and we don't put anything on title. Those are the conditions for farmers to come into this space, but we've been able to navigate that. because the way we systematically built this thing to protect the privacy interests, while yet providing the sort of the ultimate incredibility to the marketplace. It's not a trick, but it's neat that we've been able to navigate that in a very sophisticated way. Again, where ALUS now exists in 42 communities across Canada and growing. There are well over 45 funding partners at the top end of our pile at any one time. That includes a lot of household name companies. That includes a lot of municipalities, for instance. And that to me was one of the most undervalued things that people didn't see in this space is the relationship between what happens on that farm and how that municipality downstream can save money. Is a clear one now. It's clearly identified. We have 21 municipalities in Alberta that are full partners with ALUS. So yeah, there's a lot of beneficial interest to our work. It's not carbon, it's not biodiversity, it's a blend of all these things, and addressing the landscape impacts that these people have, whether it's a government representing for society. And at the same time, it allows us, because we're bringing money in from several different directions, to have a truly landscape impact in our communities. So we've got a lot going on emanating from that ALUS hub that's beneficial to that community in a number of ways, which is kind of where it begins.
So like a year from now, 5 years from now, you've mentioned it's not a hard sell. Basically, once people hear about it, farmers hear about it, participating in that seems like they probably self-select for it. It seems like more companies are becoming conscious of this and wanting to have, be doing their part or feeling pressure to do their part. Where do you see it a year out, or is there any aspect of, strategy moving forward that you're wanting to move the needle on that maybe you're still working to figure out between, the next year or 5 years?
Well, I think that's becoming, in the last years, it's become quite clear in our minds that an ALUS chapter or community can exist in every agricultural community across Canada. And what I'm thinking is, we have Lions Club, we have Kiwanis Club. They do good works in their communities. They're supported by a national organization, but first and foremost, they look after doing the good works in their communities. We think an ALUS, an adoption of an ALUS model in every community, every agricultural community across Canada, there's potential for that. And it does different things than the Lion or Kiwanis Club. It does a very broad-minded community health, environment activity as part of the economy equation. But we've seen it in some of our leading communities where this has become a fundamental piece of how those communities work and who they are and how they identify and how they live better lives. So a chicken in every pot and an ALUS chapter in every community, does that sort of make sense?
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, this has been very insightful, and it sounds like the work that's being done is really impactful, not just immediately, but has multiple order of consequences after, a positive ripple effect for potentially generations to come. I always think it's exciting to meet other people that are working to solve meaningful problems. It's such a question of like where to spend your time, invest your resources, etc. So Bryan, thank you very much for sharing what you have.
You're welcome, Caleb.
Awesome. And then for anyone that's wanting more information, website, would that be the best opportunity to
ALUS.ca.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
And that's
simple.
ALUS.
Yeah.
ALUS.ca. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Bryan, thank you so much.
Thank you, Caleb.